And welcome to Graduate Alumni Professional Day. I'm Katie Comboy. I'm Provost and Senior Vice President here at Simmons, and it's really a pleasure to be here with you this morning. One of the things I'm aware of is that there are people who couldn't be here this morning, and we are filming this event, and we're going to make a link available to everyone who might have liked to be here and isn't able to be here, for this plenary session at least. We'll make that available to all of you as well, if you'd like the opportunity to go back and review what you saw here. But I've just been asked if I could get everybody who's here to give a wave to all your fellow alumni who are not with us, so that we can tweet it out to them, and also so that we can capture it here on the film. So if everybody just really hokey, give a wave. Did you get it? All right. So, again, welcome. I'm thrilled that we're having this morning an innovative gathering that brings together graduate alumni from three of our outstanding Simmons schools: the School of Library and Information Science, the School of Management, and the School of Social Work. I'm excited about the ideas and the connections that you're sure to generate today as you focus on our topic, which is fostering communities through collaboration, innovation, connection, and change. I know it'll be a stimulating day today because you're all Simmons alumni, and you will be the ones who will make it stimulating. You're passionate leaders in your professional fields and in your communities. I know that each one of you brings a lot of wisdom and experience to the table today, and so we have a lot to learn from each other. This interdisciplinary gathering actually is a perfect capturing of what we're really trying to do at Simmons as a multifaceted urban university. We're trying to take an interdisciplinary approach to much of the learning that can happen here. The list of interdisciplinary courses at Simmons and programs at Simmons continues to grow. We're committed to preparing students and graduates to be passionate leaders who can follow in all of your footsteps. So our day today will get off to a lively start with this plenary session. It will be followed, as your program tells you, by 5 concurrent workshops. And after lunch, each school's alumni will gather to network, celebrate, and reconnect with each other. So it promises to be a full and stimulating day, and we're going to get started. I want to mention that in your programs, in your folders, there is a publication that tells you something about the work of faculty, particularly the scholarly work of faculty. It's last year's publication. The next edition will actually be out on May 1st. So we will send that to all of you so that you can keep in touch with what's happening here at Simmons and understand how the faculty whom you've worked with in your various programs continue to grow and develop themselves as scholars in their disciplines. So we'll now get started, and I'm pleased to introduce Dean Eileen Abels of the School of Library and Information Science to kick off the program. Eileen?
Thanks, Katie, and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us on this beautiful spring day. You knew someone had to make a weather joke, right? Okay. You heard a little bit about tweeting a moment ago from Katie, and I just wanted to give you the hashtag should you choose to tweet about the exciting conversation that we're about to have. That's hashtag SimGradAlums, that's SIMGRADALUMS. Thought maybe we would have it on a slide. Okay, so as we know, fostering community is a complex endeavor. It requires dedicated work by people who know, as Katie mentioned, how to collaborate, innovate, connect, and change. No one knows that better than our keynote speaker. And Simmons is a perfect venue for this conversation. Again, as Katie mentioned, we're a small women's college in an urban environment, and we're located in the heart of the medical capital of the world. So our keynote speaker, Bill, was a newlywed and spray painter at a factory when he moved into Codman Square in Dorchester as a 19-year-old. The neighborhood was the line between the black and white community, and it was literally burning down amid racial tension and disinvestment. The subject of Bill's talk is how he and a group of residents used the creation of a health center as the tool to rebuild a community. The success of the Codman Square Health Center has made it a model of innovation for other communities. Please join me in welcoming Bill Walsack to Simmons.
Thank you, Dean Abels. I have to figure out how to get this thing on now. What was it? How did it work? Sorry, I'm 60. We don't know anything about this. Okay. Anyway, thank you. I really appreciate being asked to be here today. I enjoy talking about ways we can use the systems that we have to make a difference. But we're all here today because we care about making the world a better place. For the most part, the people who are here spent years getting degrees so you could be certified as essentially a do-gooder, right? And you're out in the world dealing with problems which seem overwhelming, working in bureaucracies which sometimes defy logic and common sense, working under regulations that sometimes do the opposite of their intent. I'm here to say that we can make our world better, working within the system, but we need to think differently about how we use it. The title of today's Professional Day, Fostering Communities, Collaboration, Innovation, Connection, Change, is all about thinking differently. Working interdisciplinarily, is that a word? All right. Breaking down silos that separate service workers and solutions, to separate service workers and solutions to problems, defining what we mean by success, and having a vision for what we want to accomplish that guides us. None of these things are easy to do, but all are doable. My job here this morning is to tell you a story about a community that looked at a problem differently and saw ways to tweak the existing systems to help solve difficult problems. I'm going to tell you a story about a community that I moved into in the early 1970s during a horrific time of disinvestment, racial conflict, and systemic collapse. As I tell the story, I want you to think about the basic, let's see, how does it, okay. These basic questions. What is the community of activists trying to do? What problems are they trying to fix? What tools do they have to fix them? And what are the strategies and tactics that are used to achieve their goals? You have more tools than you think. So, what I want to do is introduce you to the community of Codman Square. Codman Square is right in the center of Dorchester. It's like, take that slide up there and put a point right in the middle of it. And it is in the dividing line between communities. It's always been a dividing line between communities. Dorchester was annexed to the city of Boston in 1869. And at that point, the community of Dorchester was developed very rapidly into an urban area. It was because Boston at the time was just really jam-packed with people, and people started moving out, immigrants moving out. By 1920, Dorchester had over 200,000 people, and it was split right along Washington Street, which is a north-south street that Codman Square is located in. The western half of Dorchester wound up becoming largely a Jewish community, and the eastern half became Catholic, mainly Irish Catholic. And so that's the way it existed up until World War II. And so there was a definite dividing line. It was a religious dividing line. And we're gonna talk about what happened to that. So here's some pictures of Codman Square. This is a postcard from the 1960s, believe it or not. These are postcards from about 1910, the golden era of postcards, where every community had its own set. Anyway, so that's actually, this is the old Codman Square Branch Library, now called the Great Hall on the left. And then this is the second church, which is a really important institution in Codman Square because it's right in the center of the square. It dates back to 1805. It actually has a bell in the tower that says Paul Revere and Son on it. Old Dorchester High School, where famous graduates included Rose Kennedy and Ray Bolger, the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. And when he died, they had the obituary in the Globe, and they said that Ray Bolger has walked down Talbot Avenue, where the street is located, where the high school is located, and into immortality. These are some pictures of old houses. This is a Gothic cottage from the 1840s, and this is a high Beaux-Arts kind of Victorian house, two-family French mansard, typical urban streetscape commercial area. Three-deckers, the kind of ubiquitous three-decker. Single-family homes, and these pictures were actually taken, if you look at the old cars, they were taken by me in 1975, I think. And this is looking into Codman Square along Norfolk Street, which is an old Indian trail that predates European settlement. And then this is the commercial district. Now you may notice that there's a abandoned building in here. What happened to American cities, but happened especially in Codman Square, during the 1950s, 60s, and 70s was total disinvestment, and just they opened up the gates and people left. Boston in 1950 had a population of 801,000 people. By 1975, it was down to 550,000. 250,000 people. But it was even greater than that because at the same time, about 50,000 black people moved into the city. And so what you wind up with is about 300,000 people left, mainly the middle class and kind of working class people who could afford to buy houses in the suburbs. And of course, African Americans were discriminated against. Many suburbs actually had covenants forbidding sales to black people. You think of like Levittown, New York, or Levittown, Pennsylvania. They had covenants. Black people weren't allowed to buy houses in those areas in the 1950s. So you wind up with essentially an outflow not only of white people, but an outflow of people of means. And you see this in the collapse of the commercial district. So Codman Square commercial district just starts collapsing. Now, if you have a housing stock that can accommodate 801,000 people, but you only have 550,000 people living there, what happens to the price of real estate? And, right, crash. And what happened in Dorchester in the 1960s and 70s was that housing values crashed to near zero. And you could buy a house for $1,000 in Dorchester in those days, in decent condition. But a lot of the houses were insured for $10,000, say, at the time. And so there's a lot of arson fires because people couldn't sell their houses at any price. Many people couldn't sell at any prices. So you wind up with this total outflow and then a collapse in the real estate market. And because of the middle class outflow, you wind up with a collapse in the business district because people were starting to go with, people with means started going to malls and shopping centers and shopping plazas. So what you see over here are all beautiful old Victorian houses that are burned down, typically for insurance, sometimes just for fun because there's nothing to do on weekends and kids would just burn them down because there's so many of them. Literally, in the mid-1970s, there were, on average, one house fire per day in the mid-1970s. It was the day when the fire department was very, very busy. Some abandoned houses, abandoned commercial property, abandoned six-family houses. These didn't even have fires. They were just abandoned. People would go in and rip the copper out of it because it was very pricey at the time. Commercial district just collapsed, absolutely collapsed. And then, there were break-ins to the remaining ones and fires. It was an absolute disaster. And then the government would come in and rip down all the buildings. So you wound up with thousands, literally thousands of vacant lots in western Dorchester in those days. Here's an apartment building that had a mysterious fire. The whole thing burned down. And here's actually the front of the now parking lot of the Codman Square Health Center where 4 stores burned down. It was the old Codman Theater. Here's actually the building that became the Codman Square Health Center that was an abandoned nursing home at the time. This is another building that had 4 fires in the 1960s and was completely abandoned. You'll see an abandoned 3-decker in back of it. And virtually that entire block was completely abandoned. That building is now going to be the Codman Academy K-8. So beyond that, though, beyond the economic disaster that was happening was social disaster and social pathology. So you see these Dorchester Badlands, right? I mean, come on, really? But this is the way it was perceived. And unfortunately, when the media perceives something is happening that way, then it kind of infects people as well, and they lose hope. They lose any sense that things are going to turn around. Racial murders started happening. This is a racial murder in Codman Square. And then you see it also in the healthcare system, where we actually wound up with an infant mortality rate, for those of you in healthcare, of 26.4. 26.4. That's third world rates happening right here in the city of Boston, the city where Harvard Medical School is 100 yards from here. So this is what's happening in the city of Boston at the time. So what do you do about that? So I'm 19 years old. I dropped out of college to actually do some organizing work for the United Farm Workers out in Denver, Colorado. I moved back into Dorchester with my new wife, or my then wife, or no, my only wife. So my first wife, who happens to be my only one. We move into Codman Square, and we move in right into this tinderbox. It's fallen apart. It's a disaster. There's fires. There's racial murders. If you read Common Ground, the book about busing, there's right near this is the Debnam family on Center Street, and they were a black family that moved onto the white side of Washington Street and were immediately firebombed. And so groups of people would actually protect the house 24 hours a day for months and months and months at a time. This is the kind of things that were happening at the time. So what do? You're a community organizer, right? You want to help. You want to do something. You have time because you're a spray painter. And what do? So we started going to community meetings. And these community meetings were horribly depressing, just horribly depressing. You'd hear about who moved out, what house burned down, what store closed. It was just like, oh my God, how can we go to meetings on this? And then the city announced the closing of the Codman Square Branch Library, which was one of the great buildings in Codman Square, great old Georgian revival building. And people said, geez, this is going to burn down. What could we do with it? Somebody said, what about putting one of them new health center things in there? And so my question was, what's a health center thing? And they said, well, medical thing. They got one up in Bowdoin Street now, and there's one over in Columbia Point, and there's a couple others that are starting. Why don't we look at that? So we did. And we had a meeting in 1974 where a few people that had started these other health centers came together and said, we started this health center. We were able to take over an old storefront to start it up. We were able to provide medical services. We were able to get some government money because it was a way of getting patients to stop going to emergency rooms for primary care, which is a very expensive way of providing primary care. And in fact, what had happened in Codman Square was, although there were still doctors in Codman Square, the doctors had all closed their practices, so meaning that they didn't want black people going there. And what that did was it forced the new African-American community to go to the emergency room of Boston City or to the Carney Hospital to get basic primary care. You're pregnant, you go to the emergency room. You have a kid that needs immunizations, you go to the emergency room. It's a crazy way of providing it. So in 1965, the first health center in America was launched in Dorchester at the Columbia Point Housing Project. And there were a few that had come along at the time, and these were things that, the community groups could figure out how to do. It was one of the rare things. In the 1960s and early 70s, community groups had very little that they could actually do. We looked to the government to do it, but the government was flummoxed. They didn't know what the hell to do about urban disinvestment and fires and arson and stuff like that. They really didn't. It was just something that was happening. And, frankly, I remember going to police meetings in those days, and we'd complain about all these things, and they'd say, well, what are you still living here for? When you move out? And it was like, well, no, we want to fight for this neighborhood. We want to make sure this neighborhood's great. But in any case, this is, so what do we do? Let's start one of these, let's see what we can do to start one of these health centers. So why do we do it? It was a tool. It was available to us. It was something we could use to try to regenerate the community. So take a look at it. The definition of health. You could drive a truck through this definition, health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease and infirmity. Wow, that's a great definition. Because with that definition, you could turn a health center into anything, really, anything that helps. And that's exactly what we decided to do. So here's our incorporation paper. Everybody looks at those pants and say, well, did you loan the jacket to that woman next to you? And that's actually Paul Guzzi, who was retiring as the chairman of Boston Chambers, right in the middle. He was the Secretary of State at the time, handing us our incorporation papers. Anyway, 4 years later, after a protracted struggle with the city of Boston over getting access to an abandoned building, we finally opened up, and that's Mayor Kevin White with the thing in his mouth there, who came there, and boy, was he begrudgingly there. It was 3 days before the mayoral election in 1979 when we finally opened up. So what do we have? We have a success. We saved a building. We started community services. It was primary care because the government allowed us to have a couple of doctors. And it was finally a success story. Finally, people got to point to something and say, hey, we were able to do something. But the big issues were still, it was, access to medical care, yeah, but the things that kept people up at night, the things that made people absolutely terrified to walk home after a day of work, were violence, crime, the kids on the corner dealing drugs, teen pregnancy, the fact that the schools are just terrible, the disinvestment aspects. What can you do about that? And so what we decided to do in the late 1980s was, let's organize the community and figure out what a strategic plan would look like. We didn't call it a strategic plan. We didn't even think about that as strategic plan. We thought about it as, let's build an action agenda. We called it an action agenda. What could we do to improve safety, to get kids into things that, that would keep them out of trouble? What could we do to deal with teen pregnancy rates? What could we, teen pregnancy rate is not a medical condition, it's a social condition. It turns into a medical condition when they get pregnant, but let's face it, it's the kind of thing where, it's something that has to be stopped with hope. It has to be stopped with a sense of a future. And you're not going to do that in the medical system, or at least easily in the medical system. So here's what we did, do a community organizing effort. We decided to rechristen the crime problem or the violence problem as a public health issue, right? We're a healthcare center. This is a public health issue. Let's deal with it from a medical perspective. What could we do about violence? It was the #1 issue facing people in that community in those days, and still is, frankly. So community organizing, getting out there, helping people create their own crime watches and block clubs and, social capital, developing social capital, essential on this. Taking over a park. This was actually a park that was taken over near current Dorchester High School, which was absolutely infiltrated with drug dealers. And, went out there, camped overnight for 3 nights to keep the drug dealers out. Of course, they came right back in afterwards. But, nonetheless, it was a statement that the community could make. And then with good stories about the turnaround of a community with, people activate, we started seeing businesses come into the old storefronts that were abandoned. We started getting great publicity. And one of the things we realized about the publicity was that it was great for a whole range of things, right? So one thing is, it was a third party saying there's great stuff happening in this neighborhood, so foundations and other organizations would decide to invest. And it was also great for the community, because the community had lost hope. If you don't have hope, you can't turn around a community. So it gave hope to the community to say, geez, other people think that this is a worthwhile community, it can be fixed, it can be solved, we can work this thing back. And so we started getting a lot more activity, a lot more community engagement as a result of the good publicity that came out. We birthed inner city success stories, and residents sparked the revival of Codman Square. Cooperation, isn't that one of those things we talk about here? Oh, collaboration, sorry. New life in Codman Square, being able to use it. We were, pioneers in the private-public partnership stuff, getting government to collaborate with private developers to be able to rebuild sections of the commercial district that had fallen on hard times. So Codman Square Health Center was a core to what was happening, but it was not the only player in this. It was just, the health center had more capacity. We're a nonprofit organization that had a chief financial officer and a chief executive officer and various people there that could be used as infrastructure to add other things onto it, add other programs onto it, to do things. It was a tool to be used to broaden the scope of what could happen. So, so at the year 2000, and just to skip forward another decade, what do we have? Lots of medical care, 100,000 visits, dental, eye care, behavioral health, radiology, public health, civic engagement programs, getting people to register to vote 7 days a week at the health center, earned income tax credit, financial literacy programs, all sorts of adult education programs, all sorts of things that are really important as glue to hold communities together. And then we decided that it was important to expand what we were trying to do through partnerships. The health center was getting kind of unwieldy in a lot of ways. We had way too many programs, mission creep, that kind of thing. Mission creep is not as problematic as you think, but it is something that draws the energy away from core. And what you need to do is, in expansion, is consider partnerships in order to do that. So Dotwell is a partnership with the Dorchester House to kind of merge some activities and broaden their scope, create new services, just and build capacity. Health Leads is there. It's a wonderful program. Students go there and are taught basic social work. You have a problem, your electricity's turned off, you have a kid with asthma, there's problems with the courts, whatever. These are things that can happen through Health Leads. It's a great program. The Family Schools Initiative, putting workers inside the schools to help the teachers understand what's out there, the services out there to help the kids that are, falling apart in their classrooms and the families that are part of that. Safe City, an anti-gang violence program that largely operates out of the Bowdoin Street area. Neighborhood Council and Bold Teens. Bold Teens was a group of mainly girls, but some boys, that took on the pharmacy industry. I mean, it's pretty amazing to think about this group that went to the city and got cigarettes banned from all pharmacies in Boston. That started with teenagers, mainly girls. And they went in there and they would stand in front of the pharmacy in Codman Square with pickets and say, stop selling cigarettes, stop selling cigarettes, they're bad for you. And we would, the pharmacy director or whatever would typically come to me and say, can't you do something about those girls? And I'd say, no, they're tough girls. They do what they want. And so it's just amazing. They also brought a farmer's market into Codman Square. It was, it's quite a thing. Here's the farmer's market with former Mayor Tom Menino. And HealthWorks at Codman Fitness Center. You think about the healthcare system and you say, okay, what's the key ingredients of health? How about nutrition and exercise, right? Why does our healthcare system completely ignore nutrition and exercise? I would say it's, if it's 1% of the total budget of healthcare, that's a lot. But we totally ignore it. So what do you do if you want to build a stronger community, healthier community? Well, you got to do something about it. We were able to bring HealthWorks for women into Codman Square, and we expanded it to HealthWorks for kids, too. And the deal was, if I could raise $800,000 to transform a section of a building that we owned into a fitness center, that HealthWorks would do it and do all the fees on a sliding fee scale, just like the healthcare system. And so people can go up there for from $0 to $30 a month, depending on your income, and participate in fitness programs. Here's our kids program. Daily Table, opening in April. This is rather controversial, but frankly, I've been behind this from the beginning. It's about taking expiring food and creating very nutritious food and selling it at a song, selling it really, really cheaply. And some political people in the Codman Square area complaining about it, saying, how come you're not doing it in Weston? It's like, well, come on. Nobody's putting a gun to your head to shop there, But it's open in April, and the promise of it is high quality nutrition, food that's pre-cooked, that you can go there and get it, and they'll sell it for a song. And it's a nonprofit. It's actually started by a guy named Doug Rao, who was the CEO of Trader Joe's for 17 years. And it's really cool. It's going to be next to the fitness center, so kind of combining that high nutrition, good exercise opportunity for people. But here's the big issue, right? If you look at all these things, and this is probably the most important example of this, is almost every house in Dorchester was built before 1970, all right? And almost all of them were built before 1920. But houses were built at that time. They were all painted with lead paint, all of them. But if you looked at a map of where lead paint poisoning happened or happens in it, it's only in areas of poverty. There's almost no incidences of lead paint poisoning in the more middle class and working class communities. So if you kind of look at that, it's like, is the problem lead paint or is the problem poverty? And if that's kind of one of those things, if you think about it a little bit differently, you can say, wow, we're not doing anything. We are not adding opportunity. We are not able to make things better if we don't deal with the poverty issue. So probably the most important thing that the Codman Square Health Center did during my tenure there was reclassify the disease we were fighting as not obesity or diabetes or asthma, but poverty. What can we do through the healthcare system to deal with poverty? We're going to deal with teen pregnancy, obesity, school failure, stuff like that. We got to deal with poverty. We can't, it's not a healthcare issue. But it is a healthcare issue if you look at the World Health Organization definition. So what we did was we said poverty is the main cause of public health. Education is the most potent way to move out of poverty. A connection to education will result in more success for patients in both health and life. A school health center combination would give tremendous opportunities for youth. And connecting healthcare to versus via group visits can create a pipeline for educational success. These are some of the things we worked on. You'll hear a lot more about Codman Academy because our founder is here, Meg Campbell, and Jess Eves is going to be giving a talk on it later, so I won't spend as much time on this magnificent institution. But the idea behind Codman Academy was, could you connect a school and a health center, actually put the school inside of a health center, so that these kids, overwhelmingly of color, can go to a school where they see health professionals wandering around the halls because they're in the same hallways, where they can understand the healthcare system, where they can get health if they need it, and can they learn in a great environment that's going to allow them to see the opportunities that come from the healthcare system. You know, was it 18% of all jobs in Boston are in healthcare? Professional health professions jobs pay good middle-class wages. You want to beat poverty. The quickest way in Boston to beat poverty is to become a health professional. And so we looked at this as a great opportunity. Let's try something new. Let's try this idea of connecting the school to the health center, and figure out how to work it. Codman Academy is a great institution. 6 days a week for the high school. It's the students advance greatly because of it. If you saw the Globe yesterday, there's an article about how the charter schools in Boston have made remarkable progress, even in low-income and minority communities. Many of the students receive care from the health center. It was declared the healthiest school in Massachusetts in 2011, partly because an amazing nutrition program, but also because banned junk food, banned sugar-sweetened beverages, just a total health environment, and placed that within the health center. And they all get to participate in health career internships. So, and it's now adding a K-8 school. It actually has pieces of an K-8 school, but across the street there's a K-8 going in. So, this is, tremendous success story. These are some pictures from our earlier graduates. But the, coming in and into the health center, the social justice theme, exercise, a really, really important part of it. Just this whole health environment, and understanding what the healthcare system can produce for you, and for all sorts of different reasons. So here's pictures of kids learning about healthcare and learning that it's not just doctors and nurses, but there's a whole range of things. The health center built and the school combined to build a wing on the building, and the idea behind it was bump rate. What could we do if we really kind of connected the healthcare workers and the teachers and the students, and had a single cafeteria for everybody and had different open spaces for it? This is an idea. Some people call it a bump rate, but it's really ideas. Innovation will happen when you bring people who think differently together and get them to think together. So there's a new wing on it. Model 2. So you'll hear more about the Codman Academy later. Model 2, the centering healthcare system, the group visit model. I don't know who came up with the idea of the 10-minute visit, but it's a stupid idea, right? Isn't it? I mean, 10 minutes? You're going to see, you can change your life over 10 minutes. I can tell you that I go to the Codman Square Health Center for my visits, and the doctor, it's a 10-minute visit, great doctor, and he, sits there and he says, geez, you need to exercise more, and nutrition really, it's horrible. You need to eat better and eat less and lose some weight and all that. And that happens every 4 months. What can you really do in a 10-minute visit? It's not going to impact you. But the idea of group visits is a fascinating idea, because all of a sudden that visit goes from 10 minutes to 2.5 hours. And in that 2.5-hour period, you could do all sorts of things with it. You can teach cooking classes. You can bring health educators. You can have people understand, do their own tests, their own urine tests and stuff like that. This mainly is with pregnancy, but also with young children as well. It's a kind of model I think ought to be really embraced, but right now the reimbursement system makes it really funky to get the dollars from it. But somehow we figured that one out. But in any case, here's our little babies, and it works. So at the time that I departed from Codman Square, this was the Codman Square Health Center. It's like healthy living, lifetime holistic health care, health leads for patient support, public health programs, fiscal health. If you're looking at poverty as being an issue, you got to have fiscal health programs. So the model, the other thing to think about this is that this is the model is very organic too. You know, it's like you look for opportunities, you figure out if it fits within the overall vision, and then you see if it can be put in there. So, you know, high quality clinical services, program to assist residents with crises, partnerships to add resources, education to eliminate cyclical poverty, a holistic model of care, creating a culture of health within the community, engaging the community on thinking differently about their own health, and definition of success in the community in which residents thrive, have access to many opportunities, connect the silos of services and opportunities, and also to be a model for other communities. So ideas to consider as you think about this, you know, linking to education, you know, changing the visit model, bringing in early childhood educators into your clinical visits. This is something that was so fundable. A way of making sure that children are prepared for school. Bringing the healthcare system into early education. This is something I think it's crazy that we don't do. It's the healthcare system that has access to the pregnant women and the babies. It's not the education system. But when we talk about early childhood education, it seems that it's always focused on schools. Schools don't get those kids until age 4 or 5. We need to think differently about that. We need to think about the healthcare system and a partnership between the healthcare system and the education system to be able to deal with that. So, you know, using the power of prescribing, you know, the farmer's market, doctors can write prescriptions for free membership, for free food. The fitness center, doctors can write prescriptions for free memberships. This is stuff like that. Being a model for the community, banning sugar-sweetened beverages, you know, just do something like that. If you're part of something, take a stand on an issue. It sends a message. And partner with people that have the same vision that you have for the community. That's a really important thing. New ideas. We all know about the Affordable Care Act and what the Affordable Care Act has the potential to do. You think about it. It's everybody gets health insurance. Well, that gives you access to a healthcare system. It's supposed to promote prevention, wellness, and public health. We'll see if it actually does that, but that's part of the goal of it. Promotes access to health professions, jobs. It helps community health centers expand, and it also has more transparency and uses data, both big data and small data, to be able to do that. It's opportunity that needs to be exploited, and it needs to be pushed in the direction of health rather than just medical care. And that's one of the problems. We don't have a health care system. We have a medical care system. So, you know, think about it, possibilities. How do you refocus the Affordable Care Act is a very important thing, and we all ought to be thinking on the same wavelength. So I have some pictures here from modern-day Codman Square. It's not nirvana by any stretch of the imagination. It's a great community. It has opportunity, more opportunities. It has a great school. It has a great health center. It has, you know, a busy commercial district, mostly immigrants. And it's working fairly well. But these, you know, the old Dorchester High School is now housing, commercial district. The old library became the Great Hall, a big community meeting facility. Here's the meeting. And then, you know, just little things like planting flowers. Here's the health center building when we purchased it in 1988, I think it was. And this is the same exact building through various grants, about $80 million in grants altogether. But yeah, that's the same picture, believe it or not. They're the same place. This pictures, this is staff, and this is kind of the end of the presentation, although I have a final comment to make. This is a wonderful picture by a 13-year-old foster child in a middle school. And you think about, you know, this kid's parents were both drug addicts, living in a foster home, which can't be a good thing, although it's better than the alternative. Going to a middle school that was absolutely horrendous middle school, but a teacher saw this beauty. This person had such talent and got, the health center had this competition, art competition, and this was the first prize. And she won a cash prize of $300, I think. But Taisha Turner was a person with great talent. I like to think that, you know, you can have absolute horrible circumstances, but somehow beauty can come from that. And if you just think about if you have the right person in your life or the right institution in your family or whatever, these things can happen. And we ought to be thinking about the power of that. So here's my pitch for today. None of the people who made the changes and made this change happen were great visionaries, and certainly none of them came with a pile of money to make these things happen. But they did have a very compelling vision for a future that solved problems that would make the community a better place to live and provide opportunity for people. They saw the interconnectedness of the issues of housing, health, schools, and were willing to bend conventional practices, to seek help where they could find it, work with anyone who would help, think differently, and were able to change the trajectory of the community and create opportunity for families. They didn't start off thinking that healthcare was the issue. Indeed, it is not. It is poverty, but the healthcare center could be tweaked, and the healthcare system could be tweaked to both deal with health needs and foster collaboration, innovation, connections, and change, which led to a much better place of hope and opportunity. The other thing to think about, it wasn't a mass movement. Codman Square is a great example of Margaret Mead's famous quote, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. It's absolutely true, and in Codman Square's case, absolutely true. Small group of people. The lesson of Codman Square is that with a compelling vision, adaptable tools, good organic strategy, and hard work, positive change can happen, and we can all play a role. The opportunities for change are all around us. Thank you.
So to build on your thought-provoking keynote remarks, I'm pleased to introduce our panelists who are going to react to your remarks, starting with our distinguished faculty. So can I ask the panelists to please, all panelists, including the deans, please come up and have your seats. I'll briefly introduce the panelists. The three faculty members will then talk about what they got out of the talk from their perspective or from the perspective of each of our schools. Bill will have a chance to respond to that. I know I have a lot of questions, so after we have these reactions from our faculty, we're going to open up the floor to your questions. So if you have questions, note them down because you'll have plenty of opportunity to ask your questions. And then we'll be wrapping up with the deans toward the end. So I'm going to introduce our panelists. Candy Schwartz, professor at the School of Library and Information Science. Kathy Minahan, dean of the School of Management. Who is next? Robert Coulomb, professor of practice at the School of Management. Suzanne Sankar, the interim dean of the School of Social Work. And Peter Marimaldi, professor at the School of Social Work. So we'll begin with Candy with her reactions.
That was a wonderful talk, and I think this picture is amazing. It's such a portrayal of hope in what sounds like circumstances that have improved, but that clearly have more to do. I mean, this is just inspiring, so thank you. I'm speaking from the point of view of SLIS, the School of Library and Information Science, but particularly the point of view of libraries, and particularly the point of view of public libraries, because I think that's the most attuned to the kinds of things that Bill was talking about, and I gather the building in which a lot of things happened. We used to be institutions that felt that we knew what needed to be done for communities, and we collected and archived for the good of some community or other. So we collected materials that we thought would be useful in our abstract and sometimes somewhat exalted sense of what we thought would be good for people. And I think one of the things that's been very noticeable about public libraries in this country, in my own in Canada, in England that I'm familiar with, in Scandinavia particularly, and many other parts of Europe that I'm aware of, that we have sort of evolved into organizations that work with communities, that try to understand what is going to serve a community. And this is true no matter what kind of library we're talking about, or archive, or museum, or gallery. We try to work with communities to figure out what it is that they need rather than telling them what they need. And that's been quite a change for libraries, I think, in the last 100 years. The other thing that I think is related to some of the things that Bill was talking about is that we have learned to use existing tools for various purposes for which they were never intended. This is something that librarians, archivists, curators, and so on have always been very good at. We have no money. Somebody invents something that we can get fairly inexpensively. It wasn't intended to do X, but boy, we can make it do X if it's going to save us some money. And we have been really good at that. So we have been very good at figuring out how to serve those needs that we have learned how to identify. We've also learned to collaborate with agencies with whom we might be thinking of as, whom we might be thinking of as competitors, especially in the public library arena, where you know that your budget is going to be assessed against budgets of other key services in the community, and how do you make a case for yourself? And of course, these shouldn't be competitive in the competitive circumstances. These should be more collaborative circumstances, and it is in everybody's best interest to act in a collaborative manner, and I think libraries have been getting much better at that. You also see some very interesting combinations of institutions. So in Paynton in England, which is a fairly small town from which my mother comes, I was visiting a couple of years ago, and as you walk out of the train station, the first building you practically walk into is a combination library and community center. One building, you walk in, there's a little desk that says sort of, how can I help you? And there's nobody there at the moment. Typically, they're running around, but it's obvious that part of this center is community services, there's a cafe, and another part of it is a regular public library, and they're closely tied together, they're administered together, they are right there at the train station, the first thing you see. That's the kind of collaboration that I think is really important. We've also become very entrepreneurial and innovative, again, for more having to rather than having the money to. So we've learned how to make very interesting things with very little money. So I think one of the things that you may have been hearing about lately has been makerspaces. Makerspaces are places in libraries and in other types of centers, but predominantly in libraries these days, where people can come together with equipment to create things. So a makerspace might provide sewing machines in a community where sewing machines are not common, but where people might want to learn to sew. It might provide welding equipment, might provide computers, might provide sound recording equipment for teenagers who want to make music and don't have the means to do so in their own homes. So much of what these spaces are intended to do is help communities create content. Libraries aren't just holders of content, we're also helpers in creating content. Sometimes we are the only point of internet access in a community. What happens with those machines when people are sitting at them? We surveyed this. What they're doing is finding jobs or helping friends find jobs or family find jobs. One of the top things that when you survey people as to what they're using the internet for in libraries is either finding my job or helping someone find a job, doing taxes, getting health information. And we help people do that. We engage ourselves with health services and tax preparation and so on. We also are one of the places that you can come to find a safe, quiet space. And I think that's an example of libraries making more of an effort to understand what people need. People in any community there are people who will need a safe, quiet space to go to work, to do homework, to do contemplative work, to write, to do whatever. So there are many examples of libraries becoming more aware of what a community really needs and learning how to collaborate better to achieve some of those needs. I'll end with a thing I heard, I can't quote it exactly, so I won't call it a quote, but I heard someone say this on a panel that I was listening to that was live streamed 2 days ago from McGill University, a faculty seminar, which had some key people in the field nationally talking about the future of academic research libraries, 2 faculty who were looking at what was going on with ebooks and library collections, and frankly were very nervous about what was going to happen to their collections in the future and how they were going to work in this world with students who had never opened a printed page or opened a printed book, which is unlikely ever to really happen, but people get nervous about this kind of thing. And so there was some very good advice, and it was a very interesting panel, and if anybody wants to know more about it, I can tell you where to find it. But one of the points that was made is whatever you do in your community, everything you do in your community needs to involve everyone in that community, whether you're designing a new service, making a decision about what to do or not to do with respect to an electronic medium. Don't just ask your faculty. Don't just ask your administrators. Ask your students. Ask everybody. Don't just involve one portion of the community that you think is more important. Involve everybody. And I think that's an important lesson for all of us. So thank you.
Bill, would you like to react to Candy's remarks? I got you.
He has his mouth full of ice cubes.
No, I mean, obviously, anything that builds social capital in a community is important. One of the things that we think about in urban areas is that, urban areas, lots of people there, therefore there's a, great community or whatever. That's not true. you know, urban areas are also places where people are very transient. And the poorer the area, the more transient it is. And as a result, you know, the essential aspect of having a library in a poor community is that it's a place where people can gather. It's a place where people can be safe. It's a place where kids can go after school, where, you know, a lot of kids, latchkey kids, or they're wandering the streets. This is a place that's safe for them. But beyond that, you know, they can do all sorts of things. It's a tool that in the best of libraries is used for community building efforts, and that's the kind of thing that, you know, that's kind of what I was talking about.
Thank you. And I failed to mention that you'll find bios for all of our panelists, as well as the panelists for the workshops, in your packet. So now we'll move on to Robert Coulomb from the School of Management.
Thank you. I don't have a story anything like what you've heard from Bill. I don't think any of us can match that. It was impressive and a reminder of a lot of things. I do work on health services research, and I'm kind of at the opposite pole. I'm at 30,000 feet with data sets and stuff like that. However, one thing he said resonated with me, and it was that government can enable or impede. Kevin White was a remarkable mayor and did many things allied in spirit to what we heard, but he was an impediment to this. Well, there are times, though, when it works, and we're in a wonderful state to talk about how government can enable. I think the most interesting thing to talk about is something we now take for granted, and that's Massachusetts health reform. There was a constant theme of collaboration in what Bill talked about. Mass health reform was a unique collaboration that's very difficult to pull off in any state in the union. The business community was critical to it. Wouldn't have passed without the Associated Industries of Massachusetts supporting it. Advocates, often at loggerheads with the Associated Industries of Massachusetts, were critical to it. John McDonough, Healthcare for All, and others. Politicians were critical to it. And foundations, Blue Cross Foundation up the street was critical to it. They collaborated and passed the kind of statute that no one thought could pass. 10 years earlier, you wouldn't have been able seriously to argue that you could have something like universal coverage, and believe me, I'm aware it's not. But that health reform has reduced the percentage of uninsured citizens to about 3%. Not that we should rest on our laurels, but what I thought I would emphasize is not only that it took collaboration to pass, but it took collaboration for it to work. One bunch of technical fixes, and groups like hospitals, physicians, and the legislature and beneficiary stakeholders had to collaborate to pass them. The contrast with our current situation in Washington is obvious. It took collaboration to implement it. One of the keys to the high take-up rate in the Massachusetts reform was volunteers from Healthcare for All going door to door, getting enrollees retail, you might say, going door to door with community volunteers, oftentimes speaking through a language barrier as well as a cultural one or a racial one, to sign people up. That was widely considered one of the models of that effort. The Health Connector itself is a collaboration. A number of things that were too contentious to resolve in the legislature were resolved with a true stakeholder committee with people as varied as a labor organizer and an MIT economics professor. You can imagine that there was something a little centrifugal there. But they worked together, and I've heard them speak together and talked about how much forcing that collaboration mattered to the result. We wouldn't have federal health reform without mass health reform. And so don't underestimate what we accomplished. But federal health reform wasn't collaborative, and it's threatened. Federal health reform has enrolled 16 million people who previously were uninsured, and they're all the kinds of people you want to enroll. Well, mainly the kinds of people you want to enroll. It's threatened, and that's a reminder that even progress like we're talking about today isn't a final victory, that the ground is constantly contested. And so one of the tools you have to exercise is action to preserve what you think is important. Thank you.
The most important thing that I heard from that is that we can't rest on our laurels. Not one size fits all in terms of healthcare, and we need to adjust our healthcare system accordingly. So we all know, or we all should know, that the social and economic determinants of health have an enormous role in determining whether somebody's healthy. And it's not just access to medical care. So being able to tweak that system so that we can provide the necessary services or the broadened scope of health services or real health services, that really encompass all that, becomes vitally important. The other thing to remember is that this Supreme Court decision that is coming down that either could waste away the gains from Obamacare, even if it's a bad decision by bad justices.
You're not opinionated on
No,
that.
I would never state a political opinion. But even if it's it's still about half the states that would still be able to still have Obamacare. And there's something to work from there. And the success of that access and the improved health that would come from the right system being developed in those states would be overwhelming. It could be like gay marriage or something where it just becomes the thing that everybody accepts, that we need this. And so I'm hoping that the Supreme Court has brain, but as demonstrated countless times in the past, sometimes they don't. So, but we can be hopeful that even if it's a bad decision, that we can continue along this and we can never give up on moving the agenda forward.
Thank you. And now Peter Marimaldi from the School of Social Work.
Thank you. I want to begin by thanking my Simmons colleagues for inviting me to participate in this today, especially the people in the advancement office. They make this look easy, but it's a lot of work. I want to thank Bill for being here. You're really inspirational. You're the kind of person that we speak to our students about all the time, and you're the kind of person that gives them help. Hope and hopefully help through opportunities. So really, a sincere thank you. And mostly I want to thank the alumni for being here because we need you badly. A school really is as strong as its alumni. I'm very active in my school's alumni and very proud of it. I hope you feel the same way. I feel proud to be a faculty member here. I'd like to start my comments by thinking about, I spend a lot of time in D.C., and I do a fair amount of work on the Hill. And every time I'm down there, it just strikes me how clueless these people are about what's happening for the people on the ground. They don't understand what the drama, the everyday drama that Bill is articulating so beautifully, what that's all about for the denizens, the people in their constituencies, their districts. And there's so many of us and so few of them, so why the heck aren't we getting through? And these are the things that we try to bring to our students. And, like some people follow sports, I follow politics. I think it's really quite entertaining. So, of course, I'm a fan of the presidents. My favorite president is LBJ. I've been to the ranch. I've been in his home. I stood in the bedroom where he died recently. I brought one of his down there. I mean, it's just amazing what this man did. He was a son of a, am I allowed to say the word? Gun. But He was deeply committed to poverty. He was deeply committed. And when we think about LBJ, very often people think about how we lost the Vietnam War. And sure, we lost that war. But we had a greater defeat, and that defeat was the war on poverty. We lost that war. And it's coming back to haunt us now. Recently, I brought one of our graduates, guy's 30 years a lawyer, he's Dana Prescott. I brought him over to the public health school to give a lecture. And it was a maternal and child health group. It was faculty and students. These are the future leaders of maternal and child health in the United States because of the H-bomb. When they go places, people listen. I bring our Simmons students and them there, and I bring their people here all the time, this integration. But Dana did something that was really fascinating. He made them so angry. He blew their minds because he talked about all the elegant interventions that we're developing for families, but we're developing them for families that no longer exist in the United States. We're defining families like Leave It to Beaver, or what was that TV show? I don't watch a lot of TV. The family, the blended family that came together. The Brady Bunch. And how conveniently there was a mother and a father, and conveniently it was death that made them available to blend. It's a fantasy. And if we really think about how complicated a family is today, it's astonishing. And what Bill's talking about, this integration of education and health, is just, I want to cry. I get goosebumps when I hear you talking about that, Bill. It's unbelievable. Because if you think about it, if a child is born in poverty, what do? They're born in a healthcare facility in a hospital, and they're affected by 4 institutions. This is Dana Prescott's lecture to the public health leaders of today and tomorrow. That just astonished me how they were angry. They came after him. It's healthcare. First of all, we have healthcare. You're born someplace, and right away we're assessing the family's ability to care for a child. Then it comes either Department of Children and Family Services. We get involved with law enforcement from birth. Then there's this notion of the legal system and the judicial system, because chances are if a child's born into poverty, there's a member of the family or the extended family who's incarcerated. So the child knows those institutions well. This is all before they get to school. I'm sorry? 1 minute. I'm a professor. I could say hello for 5 minutes. So they really don't have a chance before they even get into school. And then when the educational system, here's the problem. If a kid acts out in school, they get recommended for medication. And the pediatricians in the room went crazy because, as an attorney, his argument was that the kids get medicated and the pediatricians sign off without even really evaluating the child. There's the need for the integrated health system. Very quickly, I run down some of the stuff we have our students involved with right now. I brought a couple of students down to UT Houston. We're doing a big study on medical informatics. Now, what has that got to do with social work? Medical informatics is the future. That's where we're going to determine what goes where. And this is a federal grant that's demonstrating patient safety. We're doing an implementation science grant now. I'm talking to FQHCs, directors of FQHCs. I was talking to a guy who does 70 million claims a year, and he's trying to figure out how to make things more efficient. So we bring science, the social work brings the science, behavioral science, into organizations to show people how to implement things, how to do things more efficiently. The thing I'm probably most proud of is, and I know I'm over time, just give me a minute, please, I'm so sorry, is we have our students working on a program. It's a behavioral intervention for early childhood caries, where we're training families how to take care of their kids, but more importantly, we're training the providers, the pediatricians and the dentists, the pediatric dentists, what it's like to be a single mom, to have 3 kids at home after you worked all day, and they're not going to be able to say, okay, let's sing the Star-Spangled Banner while we brush our teeth. It's just not going to happen. It's just too stressful. But the important intervention is training the providers. And finally, I will stop and say this. What impresses me most about you, Bill, is that it's something that I've been trying to do my whole career that you've succeeded at, and my old Columbia professors always talked about, is the difference between altruism and solidarity. Professionals take great pains to distance themselves from their patients and their clients. But at the end of the day, we really have more in common than different. And when we start seeing ourselves in this lens of out of altruism into the solidarity, that's when we're going to integrate systems, and that's when we're going to affect change. So kudos to you, sir.
Thank you very much. That was great. I just want to, throw this idea out. Imagine what we could do if a child born in Boston were enrolled in a school at birth, and you could connect the doctors, the nurses, the social workers, dentists, whatever, to the principals and the teachers and the support workers. Imagine what you could do if you had that kind of connection. You talk about the toxic stress on the brain from post-traumatic stress disorder that comes from poverty, right? What could be done if we actually link together those two big institutions around the individual? These are ideas that we should be pushing out there. These are, don't have to do it across the board. Just try it as a pilot, see if it works. But it's very difficult to penetrate the bureaucracy. So, just keep those ideas flowing and keep pushing, and maybe we'll get to the point where we can do these things on a basis that we could find out if it works or not.
Okay, thanks. So now we're going to open up for your questions and comments. There are two roving microphones, so raise your hand. We have a, oh, I think we have one right up here, but she has her own mic. Did you want to say something?
I just wanted to put a little pitch in for what a business school is doing with all these, that's next? That's the end. Okay, I won't talk.
I haven't forgotten you. I'm giving 10 minutes. Okay. Questions? Comments? Yes, we have something here. Either yell or get a mic. It's Deb.
You just touched on the concept of behavioral development, infant brain development, and education and healthcare. I wanted to ask you, what is the next logical step? What fits within this rubric in your mind, and who are your thought partners?
I think the work that Jack Shonkoff is doing over at the Center for the Developing Child over at Harvard is really important work, because what it says, what it suggests is that if you don't deal with the post-traumatic stress disorder that comes from things like poverty or violence or growing up in those circumstances, before the age of 2.5, you've lost the child. We've created toxic stress on the brain that is going to prevent the child from learning. So we wonder why impoverished kids wind up, not being able to grow as quickly. Well, it's because oftentimes they grow up in difficult circumstances that cause that. So, to me, the notion of just understanding that. Right now, the debate about early childhood education is K-1. That's what we're talking about. K-1's too late for a lot of kids. Mm-hmm. We really need to think more deeply about what kind of things we need to do early on, from pregnancy. We have a great system in Boston. Boston could be the ideal place to do this, because we have health centers that reach about 98% of the low-income population of Boston. We have a school system that reaches, between all the charters and the public schools district system, reaches pretty much everybody. Between the two, we should be able to deal with this issue, but it's not even on the radar. And so, to me, it's like, having that kind of acknowledgement and realizing that there's a portion of our population, of our kids, that could actually, we could prevent them from a life of being involved in the criminal justice system or social work and that type of thing by just getting there earlier and doing it. So I think that kind of pressure has to be put on politically.
Any panelists want to comment further on that, to that question? So do we have someone else? Okay.
Hi, Bill. Hi, Bill. My name is Diane Savastano, and I'm a graduate of the School of Management. I'm an entrepreneur and a healthcare professional. We spent a lot of time talking about childhood and early in life. I, in my field, tend to deal with people at the other end of the spectrum. So I'm dealing with the aging population and the aging population of people living with chronic conditions. So I was curious, in your wonderful, innovative work, whether or not you've integrated any care or creative ideas for dealing with that population.
Well, I kind of resemble that remark as part of the aging population. I've been thinking a lot about it lately. I can tell you that, the issue of Codman Square is it's a very young community filled with immigrants. And so the focus has been on young families there. There aren't a lot. In fact, in low-income communities, it tend to be a very low percentage of elders, unlike other, kind of middle-class communities in Boston. And so the number of Medicare patients, for instance, is really low. So as a result, yeah, there hasn't been as much focus on it. The focus has been more on the adults in the community in terms of getting them to participate in adult education programs, understanding that the connection between education and their own children is important. But in terms of elders, it really hasn't been there. There are health centers that serve more of an elderly population that have done things like the PACE program, for instance, which is, actually my mother-in-law's in the PACE program, which is a way of keeping people out of nursing homes prematurely, frail elders that wind up having their care. And this is a really important element of what we call medical homes. A well-performed medical home program is something that will lead to healthier outcomes, longer lives, better outcomes for people, and it can happen at any stage in life. What we need to do is implement and understand that not looking just at the medical, clinical indicators. You have to look at the other aspects of a person's life. I remember talking to Bob Master, who's actually retiring now from Commonwealth Care Alliance. And he was saying that, one of the things they do when they take on the responsibility of caring for an elder is they send the person into the house and they get rid of all the rugs that are just laying on the floor that aren't tacked down. Why? Because that's the quickest way you can break your hip, right? And like simple stuff like that is not considered in the healthcare system unless you get into one of these special programs. How crazy is that? So there are new, innovative, interesting ideas that are out there, but basically what we need to do is we need to implement these broader, holistic aspects of care, no matter what age you are, including seniors like myself.
I'd just like to encourage you to think about the diversity of age with the group that you're currently working with and bring that into caring for our older adults. There's some very creative things going on.
Yeah, Meg Campbell, who's over there at the window there, she has some great ideas on including like K1, kids in kindergarten with elders and bringing that, that whole interesting population diversity together.
Do you want to say anything?
Well, the health center is we're located next door to Kit Clark Senior Center, which is a day program, including for a number of people who have Alzheimer's, but not exclusively. That's one of the programs. And for several years, our high school students have been doing oral histories because, as people are losing their memories, oftentimes the deep, long-term memory actually is the last to go. And so they do biography, they kind of do these oral histories and then give the story back to the elders. But we hope as the building that you guys got to see with the curved front, that's going to be, as Bill mentioned, our new K1, K8, which is across the street from the senior center. So we're pretty viral in Codman Square, and certainly expect if you're breathing, we'll be working with you.
There's a question over here.
Hi, my name is Nicole Frankel. I'm a alumni of the School of Social Work. Right now I'm a substance use disorder clinician at the Dimmick Center, it's a community health center. So I didn't hear too much about Codman Square addressing any issues of addiction in the community. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are, Bill, about integrating behavioral health, mental health, substance abuse, and healthcare. A lot of the clients that I work with are, everything is kind of interconnected. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about that.
I think the behavioral health system is a train wreck. It doesn't work, and it needs to be radically reformed. There is some momentum right now on integrating medical care and behavioral health care. But, it's one of the things, actually, when I left Codman, I went to run the Kearney Hospital for a while, and my vision for behavioral health there was that I wanted to be able to establish a behavioral health system for the Dorchester community. I never got a chance to do it because I didn't last there. But I hired a great psychiatrist named Peggy Johnson and wound up with developing this. The first step was to create a connection between psychiatry, inpatient hospitalization for behavioral issues, and community health centers. So you get kind of that tertiary, then kind of the primary, and then from there, the plan was to develop into the schools. So you had this system where you got schools into health centers, into the, the tertiary system or the in-hospital system on that. And I think it's an essential ingredient. It is so missed in America. I don't know what it is. There was some Representative Story from Amherst used to say it was Roman Catholicism. The reason why I'm a Roman Catholic, just so you know. But whatever it is, we have not produced a system of care, and it's not unique among Massachusetts. It is a problem that we have, and until we kind of grab that, we're not going to understand. I think the biggest hope we have is that right now everything in the healthcare system is focused on money, and they're seeing a huge cost structure in the behavioral health system. So the notion of linking it in with healthcare is something that's right on the front burner, and there are grants coming out from both private and public sources to do more of that. But that's just the first step. It really is. And in terms of it, and I salute the work of the Dimick Health Center on this. They have really kind of launched into that early and have become the center that, in fact, a lot of health centers refer to for behavioral health conditions. Codman tends to be a episodic care center for behavioral health rather than a chronic. But it's growing, and there are 2 psychiatrists. In fact, there's somebody I met earlier that's in the behavioral health department there, and so there's work going on, and it's definitely a growing department at Codman right now.
Hi, my name is Melissa Dagger. I actually work at the Common Square Health Center, so I can speak a little bit to your question. I'm an integrated therapist there, so what that means is that if somebody comes to their doctor's appointment and talks about depression or anxiety or anything like that, we're called in, we're on call, we have cell phones, and you can go straight into the doctor's appointment and provide them brief therapy and then give them kind of a hand-holding into the behavioral health department. So for us, it's been a great and really innovative program to be able to get people who would have never thought of being in behavioral health or getting into the mental health services quickly get them services, and for them to meet someone who they can trust and rely on, and then get them into the behavioral health department. So it's, for me, it's been wonderful to see, adult men get therapy and then be comfortable moving on to longer-term therapy.
And there are taboos in communities, and especially in communities of color. It seems that in some populations that going to a mental health clinician is considered really bad or symptoms of your weakness. So one of the things that Codman Academy has actually done is try to normalize seeking behavioral health, and there are weekly meetings where behavioral health topics are discussed, sometimes and actually there's a full-time social worker at Codman Academy. So the idea of kind of normalizing it so that it can be seen as as something that you can do, that without fear of violating some taboo is very important. I think that should happen across the school system in particular. Start at the school age about normalizing the fact that people need that kind of health care and that they should be able to access it.
Question in the back.
About to finish in the SLIS graduate program, and I just wanted to say how much I appreciate Candy's comments about the power of information in people's individual and community total health. It's like that old proverb about give a man a fish and he eats for a day, teach a man to fish and he'll eat for a lifetime. With information, communities can really help themselves out of a lot of the issues that you discussed in your presentation, Bill, and I really appreciate the work you did, but I just want to stand up for the information professionals also who are assisting communities to get information that they need. Before I was in SLIS, I was an ethnomusicologist working with Native American Aboriginal communities, and the power of archival materials in changing people's view of themselves and of their future was just remarkable to me, and that's why I enrolled in library school, because I kept seeing that over and over again in the work I was doing. So, thank you.
I wanted to make a comment about the importance of business thinking and a business school in the midst of all these touchy-feely community activist people. Part of the community is always the business community, as Bill mentioned in his discussion about the amazing things that were done at Common Square, for which we owe Bill and all of his colleagues an enormous debt of gratitude. It is important, though, that the spirit, the altruism, the community of the community activists work with the business community and work in the context of business ideas, bottom lines and things like that, cost-benefit analyses, in order to get things done. Because that way, the collaboration brings everybody into the picture and becomes much more realistic and much more credible as you move forward to take small efforts to scale. I think the Codman Square effort is enormously important in terms of teaching many other organizations around Boston as to what the important things are to change in order to make a real difference in a community. The big challenge with some of the things that Codman is doing is to make them available in all communities where they're needed. And that idea of taking to scale really requires some deep business collaboration and business thinking. And that's, of course, what we're about at the School of Management. Maybe some of you wondered why we have a professor in the School of Management who's looking at healthcare at 30,000 feet, as Bob said. We have an MBA in healthcare, and I guess I've been struck by the collaborative nature of what we need to do to make that MBA the most effective degree that it can be. Collaboration with the School of Library and Information Sciences, with the School of Social Work, with the School of Nursing and Health Sciences particularly, in order that our students can go out and be a Diane Savastano, working in the healthcare field and really making things happen in both the business of healthcare, which is increasingly important as we change models of how doctors and hospitals and so forth are reimbursed, as we go to that medical center model. The business thinking behind that has to be intense and deep and very interactive across all of the specialties involved. So I think we're playing a real role at the School of Management in the kinds of things that need to go on to take the Codman model to scale.
Thank you. Suzanne.
Thank you. I want to talk about two initiatives that I think at the School of Social Work that directly relate to what Bill was talking about. And these initiatives both really come from the healthcare reform movement that's going on in the state and in the country related to the Affordable Care Act. First, we're starting next fall, for the first time, a MSW in healthcare. And this is an initiative led by three of our professors, including Dr. Marimaldi, three professors who actually have advanced degrees in public health and in social work. So I think what we're going to be seeing as we go forward with this initiative and others is a blending of social work and public health, taking the lessons of public health and applying them to social work and vice versa. We're very excited about this. We're admitting our first class for the fall for this degree. The second initiative is a behavioral health workforce initiative. So I loved hearing Melissa's comments. This is a federally funded, at the tune of almost $1 million, training grant that we received from HRSA. And this will be starting, this started actually this year, where we were able to give students $10,000 stipends to work in behavioral health settings where there's an integration with primary care. So I'm pretty sure we have a student at Codman that has one of these stipends. This is a way to incentivize students to go into this field, but it's also a way to get the schools of social work to think more about what are sort of innovative ways to think about some of the challenges that Bill talked about integrating primary care with mental health. This is a 3-year grant, so we're just in the beginning of it, and we're very excited about it, and it's really bringing our faculty, again, to be thinking more about interdisciplinary care and treatment. There are a lot of initiatives going on with the School of Social Work and with nursing around how to think about interdisciplinary care here at Simmons. So this initiative is really pulling us into that arena. But in thinking about these two initiatives that are new, it also makes me think about how we are, in fact, going back to our roots. Many of you probably know that we are the first school of social work in the country, and that we started as a joint effort with Harvard University, Simmons College, and Massachusetts General Hospital. Massachusetts General Hospital had the first healthcare, or first social work in healthcare, and the beginning of medical social work. So in many ways, we're going back to our roots. We're looking at the social determinants of health. We're looking at ways to reduce the barriers to people getting health care with these two initiatives. So I think we're very excited about the changes that are going on and the role that social work can play.
And now changing hats as the Dean of the School of Library and Information Science. When Bill started his talk, he asked, what can a community do, and what problems are we trying to fix, and what tools do we have to fix those problems? And I related very much to those questions that you asked, because as Candy pointed out, we find a tool and we make it work to provide information to people. And for all of the problems that we talked about, healthcare, the detailed, whether it be diabetes or obesity or teen pregnancy, crime, we have at our fingertips data, statistics, and information. And we package that information for the person who's receiving the information. So it has to be understandable in the language that they can understand, with the information they can understand, using the technologies that they can use and have available to them. And extending what we do now, some of the faculty are working on a new degree program in data science and analytics. So this is very exciting because it is being spearheaded at the School of Library and Information Science, with partners at the School of Management and the College of Arts and Sciences for the statistics. And we're hoping to expand that into disciplines, including social work and the School of Nursing and Health Sciences as we move forward. So it's an interdisciplinary approach to data science, and obviously the skills that we have at SLIS, databases and finding information and packaging information and organizing information, among other things, with the business analytics from the School of Management, and statistics, as I mentioned, and data science from some of our statisticians. So I think you can see that it all fits together very nicely. So any additional comments from the faculty or deans? Or Bill? Yeah.
Actually, I just want to speak about a business. You know, one of the things that you can't do innovative things unless you have a solid core of administration, and it's so important. I'm reminded, people remember Gary Larson. He was a cartoonist.
Yeah.
He had a card that I actually bought several packets of, and it was a picture of a river. Okay, so picture this river heading towards a waterfall, and in the middle of the river was a brick building with flames coming out of the windows, and on the top it said Community Health Center.
Huh?
And you opened it up and it said, things are about the same here, how are things with you? Okay? That's something that, to me, is a huge issue in the nonprofit sector, where, you know, the mission overcomes the sanity in terms of understanding how important the finances are, how important administrative issues are, and you can really destroy your opportunities to make a big change by not having that in place. So I salute Dean Minahan on you know, running an organization that is the backbone of the ability of innovators and visionaries to be able to accomplish what they do. You got to have that in place.
Love that, Bill. Thank you.
And they're taping it, Kathy. Yes.
I'd just add, excuse me, when clinicians especially come into the business program, one of the things we often hear is that their work is all about the patients. And of course, there's a sense in which that's true. But the point of bringing really many of the things that the faculty here have talked about to bear is precisely to show clinicians and people administering health programs, that it's not about the patients at all. It's, in the end, mainly about serving them, but that to do that, you have to do what Bill said. You have to have a solid foundation. Being a hard-headed analytics finance expert is probably, in many settings, the best way to serve the patients, and that's why we have these programs.
And the idea of deliverables is something that we're really emphasizing in all of our research. And when we talk about behavioral interventions, the way we're training our students is the way we're forced to work today. And without deliverables that are measurable, and measurable across a number of parameters, including improved health, quality of life, community capacity, but also costs, cost opportunities, and the benefits that these things bring. This is all part of the research today. So this notion of feelings, many of us do not allow the word feeling to be used in the classroom because feelings, we get it, but that's not going to affect change on larger systematic levels.
Just want to add one more thing to this, too, reflecting on behavioral health. I am involved at Mass General Hospital, and I know that when we look at our population of long-stay patients, i.e. 15 days in the hospital or more than half of those patients come to the hospital with behavioral health problems on top of everything else. And we make extensive use in the hospital of what is an excellent psychiatric staff for which we are very rarely compensated. It's truly unbelievable when you sit in on quality meetings, the degree to which behavioral health makes every problem worse, particularly for people who don't have resources, who have very little medical insurance, and who are desperately ill. So I want to just throw it back to Bill and say, if there's anything that can be done along the lines of what you're talking about in terms of creating a better system for behavioral health, more acceptance of it, and some way to pay for it, that would be fabulous.
So Bill, you want to give our final remark as our session's coming to an end?
Sure. I just want to say that, well, to answer on the behavioral health issue, it's very, very clear that we need to make an economic argument for behavioral health, because that's the thing that has always held it back. You know, Codman Square used to lose $500,000 a year in behavioral health services on a $20-something million budget. $500,000 a year in behavioral health services. I mean, this is, you know, you can't say that you care about behavioral health and then make sure that community agencies that don't have a lot of cash on hand have to dig deep into their whatever fund balance they have in order to pay for it. So that's something that has to be made, and obviously it's a business case for behavioral health services, and obviously medical outcomes are impacted by behavioral health issues, and that has to be what we argue in terms of getting the state to understand that it needs to provide that service. We also need to be better innovators in the behavioral health area. We need to understand that it's not this episodic kind of thing. We have to look at both the acute and the long-term issues, the chronic issues of behavioral health, and figure out the best way of approaching that. That being said, you know, I just want to thank everybody for listening. I always notice when I give a talk about, you know, how many people are looking at their smartphones.
They're probably tweeting.
Yeah, well,
They're all over the place if you want to know.
Candy was tweeting, she was not texting.
That's right, I was
I
tweeting.
got the tweets here to prove it. So.
Yeah. And I didn't see too many of that. So many of those. So thanks for paying attention. And, you know, go out. Hey, start your own revolution. Okay.
Yeah. So many thanks again for this stimulating discussion, for your excellent questions, and thank Bill again for this great keynote that's really got a lot of us thinking. So as your program shows, the rest of the morning consists of 5 concurrent workshops. They all look excellent. I'm sure you're going to have a tough time deciding which one to attend. Then we'll break for brown bag lunches at 12:30, when each school will host a gathering of their alumni. So thank you again for participating in the Graduate Alumni and Professional Day.